Today on Uncommon Convos, we have two amazing guests. Stick around to hear from two very talented men and learn some of the secrets to the successes they've had as individuals and as partners in the entertainment industry.
Hi, I'm Dennis Vanderginst. Join me in a series of entertaining and interesting conversations with entertaining and interesting people. We'll explore various aspects of the human experience and what makes life more fun. This is Uncommon Convos.
Welcome to Uncommon Convos. I'm your host, Dennis Vanderginst, and before I introduce our two guests today, I want to remind you and encourage you to subscribe to, rate, and review Uncommon Convos on your favorite podcast platform. It's completely painless. It's quick, it's easy, and best of all, it's free. And when you subscribe, you will automatically be alerted to when new episodes are available. Also, don't forget, you can learn more about Uncommon Convos, leave comments, suggestions, and watch the video version of all of our episodes simply by visiting uncommonconvos.com. Lastly, I want to thank our sponsor, Vanderginst Law. If you're injured on the job or due to the wrongdoing of another, Vanderginst Law would be honored to help. Simply go to vlaw.com for more information. Today, I am happy to welcome Rowan Joseph and Shane Partlow to the show. Shane and Rowan are business partners who have been together for quite some time and have had a lot of success over the years, which we're certainly going to explore. But separately and individually, they have each had amazing careers in the entertainment industry as well. Shane has excelled on stage as well as the big and small screens. His numerous stage roles included a stint playing Will Rogers in the Will Rogers Follies, for which he received the Bay Area Theater Critics Circle Award for Best Actor in a Musical. On television, he has appeared in such notable programs as Will and Grace, Gilmore Girls, iCarly, Roots, and Scream Queens, among others. And on film, he was in the Best Picture Oscar winner Green Book, as well as numerous other films such as Princess Diaries 2, Knucklehead, and we can't forget that cult classic, Beauty Queen Butcher. Can't wait to talk about that. Rowan has also been a successful film, TV, and stage actor. He's worked alongside such notable figures as Oscar winners Anne Hathaway, Rami Malek, Julie Andrews, F. Murray Abraham, Anthony Hopkins, and one of my personal all-time favorites, the legendary Katharine Hepburn, with whom he shared a long-term personal relationship. In addition to being cast in leading roles on stage across the country, Rowan's television credits include roles on the Emmy Award-winning HBO series Veep, opposite Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Hugh Laurie, Gilmore Girls, and Boston Legal, among others. His film credits include The Campaign with Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis. You know who I'm talking about. The Princess Diaries 2, Raising Helen, Grudge Match, and Barefoot. Rowan's also been a successful director, producer, screenwriter, and voiceover artist, all of which I intend to fully explore. And from 1993 until 2020, together, Shane and Rowan were producing partners in Theater A Go-Go, a nationally recognized theatrical touring production company which presented national tours of such shows as The Queen of Bingo, An Evening with Jack Klugman, Forever Plaid, and The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Thanks. That's the show. We're out of time now. Seriously, guys, you're so accomplished. I could go on and on as far as the introduction, and I want to thank you both for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you guys Zooming from, by the way?
Atlanta, Georgia. Well, outside of Atlanta in Gainesville, Georgia. So like about 40 minutes from Atlanta, I'd say. Northeast.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, on a lake.
Gotcha. Well, and for our audience, I just want to let them know, I met these two gentlemen through my beautiful wife, Kim, and after spending just a little time with them, I knew that we had to have them on the show. So, Shane, when we started with the intro, I mentioned Beauty Queen Butcher, and Just for those folks who haven't had the pleasure yet, it was a very low budget 90s, early 90s, I guess, slasher movie. And if I remember correctly, Shane, you were one of the writers, and that's where you first met Kim. Is that right?
Yeah. Me and Jill Ray Zerborg had written this script. We just for fun one day, we decided, let's start writing a script. So we started writing the script, and then me and Jill ended up producing it together, raising the money. I was waiting on people at a dinner theater, also raising money on the side. So we finally raised the minuscule budget that we had, and then we went to the next step of having auditions, and that's where I met your lovely wife, Kim, who's been a dear friend for 30 years. And that's where we met, was on Beauty Queen Butcher, and we just fell in love with each other, and it's been a great friendship for 30 plus years. And to think that Beauty Queen Butcher would be around and being seen on this thing they called the World Wide Web, because back when we shot this, it was shot on Betacam, and we were shopping VHSs around, and then we never knew that it would, be on the internet. And now it's, streaming. You can watch it for free on Prime, on Amazon or Hulu, and it's on several different streaming services. So I'm shocked.
Right.
It made it this long.
And it's so funny because Kim forbade me from watching it, which of course meant I had to watch it right away. And it is one of those movies, and you'll know what I mean. It's so awful, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most loving way, because of course you had a very low budget, and as you mentioned, a lot of problems or restrictions because of that budget. But it really seems to have been attracting a cult following. And of course, it was fun for me to watch it because Kim is in it. But then there's several other cast members who've gone on to have pretty good careers in entertainment, including comedian Tammy Pescatelli.
Yes.
And Tom Hart, who was recently on our show, who's a successful animated show writer, and a lot of other folks that I know. And I also noticed a lot of Partlows in the cast. I assume those are all family members. Is that right?
They worked very cheap.
I hear you. So that's obviously how you met Kim, but how did the two of you guys connect? Because if I remember correctly, Shane, you are from the Quad Cities area, but Rowan, aren't you originally from, is it Charlotte?
No, I'm from Pennsylvania originally.
Pennsylvania,
Pottsville. I was born in.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. And that raises the other issue we're going to want to talk about a little later with respect to the screenplay that you've written.
Right. The NFL.
So we'll talk about that. But how did you guys get together?
Do you want to take it, Rowan? Do you want me to have my version?
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead, Shane.
Well, Rowan can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I was starting out doing dinner theater. So I started at Circuit 21 being a performing waiter, and then started auditioning when I was, 19, 20 years old, all over the country. And I happened to audition for this theater in Springboro, Ohio, which is between Cincinnati and Dayton, called Lockamedia Dinner Theater, which Joe Mitchell ran for several years. And that's where me and Rowan met in a production of Oklahoma. And it was interesting because when we first met, we really didn't get along. We were just like, oh, who's that weird guy sitting over there in the corner with the hat on? I think you had the hat on, that Katharine Hepburn's hat. I think
I came in late too.
Yeah, you came in late, but I was like, who is this person?
I was in LA doing Beth.
Yeah, so there was this, we really weren't friends when we first met, or didn't even really think about it, but then we became friends during the show, and we've been, very, very close friends for the last, since 1987, so whatever that is, almost 40 years in 27 will be 40 years, right? It seems like yesterday, but it's almost 40 years ago.
No, it feels like 40 years.
Well, and I mentioned in the intro that you guys had been producing partners, I think from 93 until 2020. Are you guys no longer partners in the production company or
No, we're still
otherwise?
partners. It's just the production company itself isn't as active.
Got it.
But we still, there's still revenue that comes through it from a film we did and from a theater project that we own. And so the company itself, we're dormant, but the company's still going.
Got it. Well, speaking of the company, and I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit, but was the company formed to do theatrical productions or film, or was it a combination? Because I seem to remember in doing a little bit of research that at one time there were two different companies, if I remember correctly, were doing different kinds of production.
How it worked is that in 1993, we decided we were going to produce Queen of Bingo, which Rowan had optioned and taken care of with Kevin Everly, that was also one of the partners in the original company and production and partnership. And then we were in Chicago, so we formed Theater A Go-Go to do theater because we needed it for Queen of Bingo. And then it just kind of took from there. And then when we were living in LA, we formed Greenwood Hill Productions, which was doing, through Theater A Go-Go, but was doing business through Theater A Go-Go as Greenwood Hill Productions to do the film end of it when we produced Johnny Got His Gun with Ben McKenzie. So that's how that comes into play.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same company. Gotcha. Greenwood Hill is a DBA, as they say, doing business as division of Theater A Go-Go.
Got it. And I want to explore Theater A Go-Go a bit more. But before we get to that, whether I'm talking to politicians or businessmen or educators or whatever, I'm always intrigued by what it is that propels someone into a certain career, into that direction. So for you guys, what was it? And I guess at what point in your life did you decide that entertainment, or specifically acting, and then later on, of course, production and directing and writing and all that type of thing, what was it that got you on that path? Either of you can answer.
Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead, Shane. You can start.
Okay, so basically, what people say is I can remember watching Gilligan's Island when I was a child, coming home from school and watching Gilligan's Island. And I remember just looking at the TV, and I would look at it and say, instead of saying, I want to do that, I knew I was going to do that someday. I just didn't know how. So it was like intuition in that sense. I knew I'd be in the field somewhere. I didn't know what I'd be doing with what, but I knew that's what I was going to do. So I think that's how it came about for me. So it was like, and then growing up in a rodeo family, my mom was a trick rider on horseback. My dad was a rodeo clown. So me and my sister traveled around doing Wild West shows and the rodeo circuit. My sister cracked whips, and I had a trick mule named Molly that I performed a specialty act on. She'd lay down, she'd sit up like a dog, she'd count, she'd shake her head yes and no. You could roll her over and sit on her tummy. So, so I was always in some kind of performance. I just didn't know the track that it was going to take and how it had encompassed my upbringing. So like the trick roping helped me get my SAG card. I did a national commercial for CoverGirl in New York City, roping one of the world's top models. And that's how I got my SAG card, because my dad taught me how to trick rope. And then basically doing Will Rogers Follies in Chicago at a dinner theater is how I got my equity card, being the roper in Will Rogers. And then I went on in later years to do, the lead role of Will Rogers. So that's kind of how I knew.
And I want to hear the answer from Rowan too, but I have to mention, I was going to ask you about the roping, and we're, here I am jumping around, but at some point in your careers, you did the Amazing Race together, and I was looking at your bios, and it said that the proudest accomplishment in Shane's life was learning to trick rope, and I was wondering where that came from, but now I don't have to ask that because it's pretty clear. I also love that Gilligan's Island was your inspiration. I for those of us, my age or older or whatever, Gilligan's Island is a great part of my childhood,
Yeah.
and not necessarily what I would look to when I'm thinking of acting chops or anything like that. But so, Ron, what is it for you? What is it that got you down that path?
I started in high school, as so many people do. I started doing plays in high school, and then in the summer, I auditioned for and became a company member in Shillington Summer Theater, which was a summer theater in the area where I lived in Berks County in Pennsylvania. And then after high school, I continued to work with a lot of the same people. I formed, actually, before I was legally able to sign the contracts, I formed a company that produced dessert theater. If you know what dinner theater is, we would do dessert theater. We would go into different places and do shows, and we'd do the show, and we'd have another team that came and would have coffee and tea and desserts and such. And so I sort of started acting and producing initially at the same time. I got my SAG card, I think, from doing commercials, probably I'm not sure which. Their Fly Fisherman commercial for Microsoft. That was probably it. And then my equity card I got through John Kenley. Anybody who lives in Ohio and in the Midwest might remember John Kenley. Kenley Players. Kenley Players was the Broadway of the summer. Everybody, all the stars from Broadway and a lot of the TV and film stars, you'd be watching Johnny Carson, and you'd have numerous stars on there saying, "Well, what are you doing this summer?" "Well, I'm on hiatus. I'm going to work for John Kenley out in Ohio." So my first production for John was in Camelot, I think it was, with Ed Ames. If you remember who Ed Ames was, famous for throwing the hatchet on the Tonight Show. And and then I just worked as far as directing film. Shane can tell you that was more of an accident. We were going to do the stage production of Johnny Got His Gun, and then when I went to New York to view the archival video of the Jeff Daniels production, which was way back in the early 70s that was filmed, I found out it was destroyed. And so we decided to instead of do, Shane said, we either have the money to do the theater production or we can do a video, the movie production. I said, well, we got to do the video, thinking it would be a video. Ben McKenzie, who people would know from Gotham and the OC and numerous things, Ben signed on, and we made that thinking that it would just be a video that would, go out, and it ended up getting picked up and distributed and playing theaters around the country. So I always say I accidentally, produced and directed a movie, because it was not.
Well,
I didn't go
a happy accident.
So yeah. That's how I got each of those.
Okay, so you guys have both obviously had a good deal of success as working actors. I mean, to even be able to say that you're working actors is quite an accomplishment, because there's so many people that never achieve, that degree of success in the business. So, I imagine you've had your share of struggles as well. I'd like to hear you guys talk a bit about the struggles that you've faced, how you've overcome it when, other people may not have had that success. Because there's a lot of people that will be listening in or watching that would like to go down the same path, I'm sure, that you guys have been on. And what should they know? What should they be prepared to deal with, and how?
I think Rowan, I think Rowan will agree with me on some of this. As he always says, he's always told me, and I've heard him say many times, if there's anything else that makes you happy in the world, go do it. If not, then do this business called show business. And again, we talk a lot, and people say we did it. I'm not married. I don't have a significant other. It's just me. That's all I have to worry about. And sometimes that can, that's not easy either. But it also, from living on so little for so long, and now that I finally have money and do stuff, I'm still living like I live on nothing. It's just how I've been programmed and wired, because, making, so little money doing dinner theater and doing theater and going from job to job. And then as an actor, you don't know when you're going to get your next job. When you book something, you're looking for your next job, and it's just a continuous thing. So like people saying when they get fired from a job, it's like, well, yeah, just look for another job. That's what we do as actors. So, but we're not. I realize that I'm not in a normal, America as far as a worker, because this is not normal. But it doesn't seem that different to me because I've lived it my whole life as far as being what it is. It seems normal to me, but most people find it very fascinating. But yeah, we're just like anything. You struggle with stuff. You have things that come up. You have jobs that you have jobs you get fired from. You have jobs that, you wish would have done better. Just like Beauty Queen Butcher, you wish it would have taken off when it did. It hasn't taken off now till 30 years later. So, persistence and preparation are equal success, I think. So that's what I'd say. Rowan.
Well, what about you, Rowan? What are some of the hardships you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Similar to Shane, your income is not steady. For a lot of people, their income and it's the same for us. I mean, your income and your lifestyle are tied together. So, there's a reason that we're not married and have a wife or and kids or a house and a mortgage. And, it's just, perhaps it seems to be selfish, but it was self-full in terms of it was a very fulfilling life and people have different options. It was different for me than Shane because there's about almost a 10-year age difference. And I started, well before Shane did. And it was also very different when I started. When I started, there wasn't even People magazine, let alone Entertainment Tonight, let alone Deadline and all of the other stuff that's going on now. So in those days, you kind of went through an apprenticeship program. As I said, I started in high school, then I did community theater. Then I went away and did non-union summer stock up at a very famous summer stock, New London Barn Playhouse, where Stephen Schwartz, the composer from Wicked and stuff, came out of there. Then after that, I moved to New York. That helped me transition by doing summer stock with other young actors from around the country, and then moving with a circle of friends to New York, and then sort of struggling but with people, and then from there just slowly built a career. But now what happens is you have people who because of the internet, especially. I mean, even with Entertainment Tonight, people didn't think of doing this as a living, or it was very unusual to do this thing as a living. And once People Magazine and Entertainment Tonight became so prolific, everybody's thought, well, I can go do it. And then, of course, with the internet, now pretty much anybody can do it. So it's, I came up.
Look at me.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I came up, I mean, in New York, one of the companies I was in, it was a repertory company with Geraldine Page and F. Mary Abraham and Anthony Hopkins. You have 3 Oscar winners. And, I was a journeyman actor doing repertory theater with each of them in different plays. And that was my training. And now, people's training is, having a YouTube channel or TikTok or such. And so it's a very different world, and the level of competition is great. And as Shane said, I always tell people, if you can do anything else and be happy, go do it. It's the best hobby in the world and the worst career that you can ever have is acting.
And that raises an interesting point, though. Like you said, because of the internet and things like that, anybody thinks that they can do it, and they do their little TikTok or whatever it might be. But isn't it also true, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that there's more need for content because of all the options that are out there, either online or streaming, and all the various cable programs. Aren't there also then more opportunities for actors to find employment because of that need for content?
There are, but it's not exponential. In other words, yes, there are more outlets. There may be, let's say there's 100 more outlets, and I think that's probably a great exaggeration. But there are hundreds of thousands of more people trying to act, and I think that's probably an underestimation. So,
gotcha. Yes, I get that. So, of all the things that you guys do, because I know you've both done some writing and obviously the acting and producing, and I know, Rowan, you've done some directing. Shane, have you done some directing as well?
I want to have nothing to do with directing. No, thank you. No.
Okay. Well, of all the different things that you guys have done, what's your favorite and why? Would it be acting or producing writing, directing for Rowan?
Um, it's funny. I can't, I don't, my mind doesn't work that way. They're all creative, and I am an individual who always has to be working on a project, something coming up, something creative. So, because of the fact that acting, is the kind of thing that's very sporadic, it meant that automatically I needed to find something that in between jobs kept me creatively involved. And so that got into directing. And that, as I said, accidentally got into directing in film. And that accidentally, sort of by virtue of wanting to keep working in film, got me into screenwriting and creating my own projects, which we've done now. The Hex, which is the big horror film that myself, I have a writing partner in Los Angeles who's an executive at Amazon Studios, and he and I have co-written two different scripts. The one with Penny Marshall that you were referencing, the Pottsville Maroons, and then right now the big one we're working on is a low budget horror film. A little different, nothing against Beauty Queen Butcher, but a little bit. I hope a little, with all due respect, again, a little bit different. The Hex is it's a suspense horror romance that takes place in the Amish region with these young Amish boy and an English girl, with they basically, in other words, a teenager. And so it's not the job, it's the function of what you're doing that motivates me, and that is what's the driving force.
Got it. Shane, you agree with that, or do you definitely feel like, hey, I would much rather act, or I'd much rather produce or write? Or
yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things. I always say I enjoy acting a lot. It's my first love. Producing is good too. Sometimes it's fun to be in charge of everything and make the decisions, and sometimes it's fun to just be an actor. I make my $50. I go home, no responsibilities. In that sense. And as far as acting, people say, "What do you like, theater or film and TV better?" Well, I like theater because that's where I was raised, and it's that instant gratification. But on the other hand, I like TV and film, where you only have to get that performance once and capture it, and it can live on forever. And it's you have it. So, but acting's probably what I love to do. But producing is fun too.
And that's a great point about the distinctions between theater and film and television. And I've heard that from some other folks as well, that they love that instant gratification you get from being on stage and hearing the audience's response, assuming it's a good response, of course. But of course, for you guys, it always would be. So, but. I'm presuming a bit much of the audience right now too, because we're talking about a couple of things. Well, primarily, I guess, producing, and assuming that everybody knows what that entails in the entertainment industry. So maybe you should explain what's involved in producing, whether it's a theatrical production or film or television.
I'm gonna let Rowan answer this question.
I'll take that one, since that's
go ahead.
I'm the primary one on that, since I've been doing it, like I said, since I was a kid doing dessert theater. I basically, the producer is the one who puts everybody together. They hire in theater, you hire the director, the designers, the cast, all of those folks. In film, you hire the showrunner, the writers, the writing room people, all of those folks. And in theater, and film, rather, the same thing. The way I always present it to people is, as a producer, basically, if everything goes right, then it means that everybody did their job right. If anything goes wrong, it's the producer's fault, because it means you didn't hire the right person. So it's kind of in many respects, it's a thankless job. It's a behind the scenes job. And again, it's one of those where what you do wrong can ruin a project, but it's what other people do right, that makes it work.
Well, I've had this discussion with Kim, and I know she's explained it to me, and I probably still don't have it right. But what are the differences between, say, an executive producer and a producer, an assistant producer, an associate producer, et cetera? Is it just their level of involvement, or is there a financial commitment that comes with that? How do you differentiate between those?
It depends on the medium. So, in theater, we really don't have executive producers for the most part. In theater, you have producers and associate producers. Associate producer is usually someone who just puts money in. A producer is also 9 times out of 10 somebody who puts money in, and the 1 time out of 10 you have what's called a lead producer. So when you watch the Tony Awards every year, years ago, you'd see David Merrick get up and accept an award, and now you have half the audience get up and accept the award because
Right,
everybody's
yeah.
a producer because they all get the title. But really, in theater, there's only one person. That's what they call the lead producer. In television, the producer is the one who sort of puts everything together and manages it from a business perspective, but isn't really as involved on the artistic end. That's really the showrunner and the creator of the show. That the artistic falls more towards them. And in film, the producer sort of has their hands kind of in both pots. The executive producer is generally somebody who's there on set watching, making sure the dollars are being spent wisely. The producer is usually someone who optioned the property, brought in an executive producer, brought in the different people, was responsible for putting the financing together, and has several projects going at the same time. An associate producer on a film, and other times they're executive producers on a film. And a lot of times you'll see an actor's name attached either on a film or a
Right.
TV show's producer. Generally speaking, that's just part of their contract. So it's very similar in terms of the theater, where you have all these people who have the titles, but only one person is really doing the work. Generally speaking, when you look at IMDb, if it says PGA, which is Producers Guild of America, that's usually the person who was, again, the lead producer on the film or the main producer on the film. So it is nebulous, and really each project has one person who's carrying the flag and taking it up that hill. And that's in any medium, that's sort of the lead producer. And then you have all these other people who have titles, and some of them executive producers usually are on set doing work. But you have other ones that are executive producers who just, they sometimes the star's agent, part of the deal is the star's agent gets billing as an executive producer because they brought the star with them. So.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I've learned a lot today. I appreciate that.
I've learned.
Speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've learned that producing is usually a producer. What the meaning of a producer is doing everything nobody else wants to do. That's what I've learned in my years. So.
That makes sense. See, that sounds like me here. I guess I'm the producer. Not of the program. I'm talking about of the firm. But anyway, since we're talking about projects and producing, let's talk a little bit about Theater A Go-Go, and I guess specifically Queen of Bingo, because as I understand, that toured the country for quite a while. I think there was some kind of record attached to it as well. Isn't that right?
We go ahead.
No.
We toured we toured it for 14 years. So I think 2004 was the first time we took it out, and then we did it for 14 years all over the country in 38 different states, and we played every small theater to 1,000-seat theater, to banquets, to halls, to everything. And we were the longest, I think, Rowan, I'm not sure, we're the longest touring comedy.
Equity production, union production.
Equity production of the comedy, yeah. So for that 14 years with...
Non-musical.
Non-musical,
yeah. It started out as a one-act play called Give the Queen $1 at Boar's Head Theater in Lansing, Michigan. And they brought the one act, the girls who wrote it, Gene Michaels and Phyllis Murphy, they came to New York, moved to New York, and they met Louis Black, who's a comic who most people know. Louis is a good friend of mine. Sure. Louis and I were running a theater off Broadway that's still there. Now it's the Laurie Beachman Theater, but at the time it was the West Bank Downstairs Theater Bar. And it was presented there as a one act, Give the Queen $1. And when I saw it, I was the executive producer of the theater on Theater Row in Manhattan at the time. And when I saw it, I was like, boy, this could be a gold mine. So myself and our third partner, Kevin Eberly, at the time before Shane got involved, we optioned it from the girls. We said, we want you to write a full length version. The only requirement we put on them was you need to change the title from, give the queen $1. Bingo has to be in the title because that's the drawing card. So they came up with the Queen of Bingo. They wrote a full 2-act version of it, and that's what we ended up. Theater Go-Go ended up producing, and then when we did it, Shane and another gentleman from the Quad Cities, Bob Schaefer, got involved financially speaking in it, and then Shane and Kevin ended up not pulling out of the partnership, but moving on to other things. And Shane and I remained producing partners and continued working on Theater Go-Go. Queen of Bingo was originally 2 women playing the roles, as you're probably familiar with, Dennis. And then it ended up someone in Florida at a festival down there, theater festival, International Theater Festival. They approached the licensors about having 2 men play the 2 sisters roles. And Dramatist Play Service, who continues to represent both the male version and the female version of the Queen of Bingo. They called me. I'm producer, but I also am agent for the authors on the script. They asked about having 2 men do it. The author said, well, I don't know. What do you think? And my response was, well, in Shakespeare's day, men played the women's roles. I think as long as they don't camp it up or play it, campy or like 2 drag queens, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not what the play's about. I think it's okay. And we let them do it. And we all 4 were going to go see it. It ended up Shane and I went to see it. The authors didn't. We loved it. Shane went, I want to play the older sister. I want to play that part. Being an actor, he was like, that's a great role. And so Shane started to play it. He can pick it up from there and tell the journey of the show from there. Shane.
So we basically we wanted to see if we could make this work because we thought Queen of Bingo with men in it would have legs. So this property had already been out there for a while, and it was being done with women and making money and being licensed, and we thought, well, let's try it. So I said, well, why don't I get a friend to see if he would do it with me, and we would do a charity event for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which we ended up doing in 2003. End of 2003, we went up to the Annie Whitmire place and we put on 2 shows there. And the people really enjoyed it. Rowan directed it. We were in LA. Rowan directed it in LA. We rehearsed in my living room in Culver City. And then we took it on the road and we plugged the 3rd character in it. There's a priest in it that plays Father Mac. And so we used a local actor there and put them in the show when we got there. And we did it for 2 shows and raised about $1,200, which we gave to Make-A-Wish Foundation. So it made a dream come true and made our dream come true that we were going to be able to produce this and it would have legs. So at that point, we ended up getting an agent who in LA that took it and was starting to pitch it. Well, he ended up getting us 30 shows at the Potawatomi Bingo Casino in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we were headed up to a casino. And so at that time, we had another gentleman playing the role of Babe, which wasn't Rowan. Rowan went with us and played Father Mac, the priest, the bingo caller, and Father Mac. Well, and then through the years, as we started to get going, Rowan gained a little bit of weight, and we decided he could play Babe. So, so that's how Sis and Babe.
Little by little, I don't tend to go back on projects or go backwards on things. I'm always working on something going forward. So when Shane came to me, it was like, please direct. All right, I'll direct. Please, could you play Father Mac? It'll save us money, saves the company money if you play Father Mac. Okay, fine, I'll play Father Mac. Then it was going to LA. We're going to open in LA for the first time. You should play Babe. You're big enough now. You can play the role. And I go, well, that's great news. So little by little, Shane has roped me. He is a terrific roper. He's a world-class roper. I've gotten roped in by him in many situations. This just being one of them.
But is this one of those situations where you're so glad that you got roped into it because it worked out for everyone?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it made a living for us for 14 years. We didn't, as actors, you always have these side jobs, unless you're extremely successful, which is such a small percentage. But, as whether you're a theater, TV, or film actor, if you work in film and TV, if you work 10, 15 days a year, that's a good year. So the other days of the year, you're doing other stuff to survive. Well, our survival job, instead of waiting tables or doing temp work or such, ours was doing the Queen of Bingo all over the country, 37 different states, and so that's even led to The Amazing Race, was because the Queen of Bingo, we got on The Amazing Race as well.
So
Right. And I want to talk about that for sure.
we would go out, a couple times a month and do a show. And then, when we go to a theater like Cape Girardeau, we went to 1,000-seat theater, and it was the best selling show that they had in I don't know how many years, but it sold, like they wanted to keep us for another show, but we couldn't do it. But it was like a 1,200-seat theater, and it was the best selling theater. It cost them nothing to do. The theater made a profit. We made money. They made money. Everybody was happy, so it's great when it works out like that. And, that was great. And then as Rowan said,
the key to that was, I think, when it became men. That's what really propelled it and made it even more commercial. And it, as Shane said, and it's true, we have so many recommendation letters from theaters thanking us because, in fact, I ran a theater in Pennsylvania for a while, and it was we came in there as a guest to that theater to begin with, and it was the most successful show financially in the entire season for that summer theater, very well-established summer theater. And that's because, as Shane was saying, the costs are so low. It's 2 actors. There's a third actor who's a smaller role and plays the caller, but, minimal set. And
Right.
it's bingo. There's a free 10-pound frozen turkey given away at every performance all over the country or wherever it's done. So it's the kind of thing that for theaters, it's been great. And now I can tell you, really, as of this week, Dramatist Play Service, we finally released. We had the exclusive rights for men to do the show. We've now released those, so now theaters all across the country can do the Queen of Bingo with 2 men playing the roles. So we think that's going to give it a whole new life on the ancillary rights, on subsidiary rights for it and licensing. So we're excited about it going on.
And do you continue to get money even though it's been released? Do you get some type of royalty going forward?
Yes. That's what I was saying before,
nice.
Dennis, when I referenced the theater Go-Go is still around because it still has income generated from that, from Johnny Got His Gun, the Ben McKenzie movie and such. But in terms of us continuing to work doing theater, that's something that we both have I especially I'm done. Shane, I think, would still go out and do Will Rogers or do theater stuff, but.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned that this kind of led to you participating in The Amazing Race. And I'm sure everyone that's listening in or watching has either seen or at least heard of The Amazing Race. So how was it that Queen of Bingo led to you getting onto The Amazing Race?
Shane can tell you that. You remember my expression that Shane roped me into a lot of things?
Exactly.
This would be one of those. He pestered me, and I thought, oh, fine. I just gave in. Thought, there's no way in hell we're going to end up on The Amazing Race. And the next thing I knew, I was hanging from a parachute off of a cliff in Chile. So, Shane,
that's crazy. I mean,
tell them how you did it. I just went along for the ride on that one.
So
I have to preface this question first, Shane. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, because oddly enough, I've had several friends who have been on reality shows and participated in these extreme competitions like Survivor and the Eco Challenge. And in fact, some of those folks have been on the show or are scheduled to be on the podcast. And I have to say to you what I say to all of them. What the hell? I mean, why would you want to do something like that? And they have, told us about the application process and, the vetting process that they had to go through. Mm-hmm. So, sorry, I had to interrupt and preface everything with that, but tell me how this happened.
Okay, so basically we were traveling, doing Queen of Bingo all over the country. It's interesting to have a show with 2 men playing these characters, of course, because we're like this and then we become these characters. So we were traveling, and then we decided, I was deciding, we talked about it. We were thinking maybe reality in the sense that something could happen with Queen of Bingo and with our lives, how we toured around the country and stuff doing this, because we were in the prime of it. So we put together a sizzle reel, which is a less than 3 minutes. And basically a sizzle reel tells a production company what you're doing, an idea, anything like that. And we actually took it out to an agent that we'd worked with originally, who actually had moved to an agency that only handled reality stuff. So we thought, okay, he knows us, we'll take it in. They loved us. They loved the product. They loved everything about it. But they were like, we don't know what to do with you guys. And me and Rowan are like, you just got to put us in a situation. What's there not to put, this isn't rocket scientists. And I was like, put us in any situation. We'll figure it out. Shane and Rowan going across the world or whatever, or babe or sis or whatever. So we had.
And Shane was a fan of the show.
Yes.
I add that too, because I think it's important to say, I sort of knew the show, but he, and especially his sister Bev, huge fans of The Amazing Race. So I didn't even know what it was. And then Shane said, I want to apply for this. And I watched it. I thought, oh yeah, right. That's going to happen. But,
so we had this sizzle reel and getting to The Amazing Race. I love The Amazing Race. I'm a fan of the show. Again, my sister is a fan of the show. So we had the sizzle reel and I thought, hey, I'm going to apply. I'm going to send it in, apply. So me and Rowan applied. Rowan said yes. He didn't think we'd get on or didn't think any of that. So we applied. We sent it. Waited. It was like a day before the closing of that application. We had like 24 hours. So we had to do it and did it really quick. So we sent it in. About 2 weeks later, we hear back from them and say, we'd like to take you to the next level of the audition. So we had to sign a 125-page contract for CBS. We had to get physicals ourselves and do all this. And then they said, send us all this stuff. We need you to make another 3-minute tape, I think is what it was. We were in the midst of moving from, we were in Louisiana. We were moving to Charlotte.
We just moved to Charlotte,
North Carolina. And so by LA. And so we made this tape. We sent it to them. And then we were going to find out after Christmas if we were going to the semifinals, which they'd fly us to LA and we'd do the audition even more in depth. Well, they called us after Christmas and said, you're not going any farther. You guys didn't make it. So that was the end of it. We're like, we spent this money on all this stuff and we did this and it was emotionally draining. We had to have our family sign confidentiality agreements and did all that stuff. And then it was at the end. And so we just let it go. So that season played out.
And I went, good. Yes. And I went, that's done with. Thank God.
That season was done. And then another season went by, and then we get a call for the 23rd season. They said, hey, it's Amazing Race. We'd like to have you guys apply again for the show. And me and Rowan talked about it, and we were like, do we want to go through this again to make it to semifinals and then not go any far? Do we really want to do it? They said, no. They really courted us a long time. And so we finally went ahead. Mm-hmm. We did the whole process over, did the audition, did the tape, another new tape, which turned out really, really well. And then we signed another contract. We signed all the NDAs again, did all that. And then they called us and said, you're coming to LA. So we went to LA. We were in a hotel in LA for a week. We couldn't leave the hotel. We were segregated to the hotel. They pulled all your phones out of the room.
We couldn't leave the room in the hotel.
Yeah. The only time you could leave the room was we got to leave the room 3 times a day, once for breakfast and lunch and then dinner. And then one time we had 30 minutes for gym time, and that was it. We couldn't talk to anybody. If we saw other contestants that were applying, they wouldn't let you talk or do anything. So a lot of people couldn't handle that. But me and Rowan had been on tour, for 10 years already. And we're like, we love staying in a hotel room and just watching TV. And what we did, which was really smart, because Rowan knew as much about the show, we watched every episode of The Amazing Race because they were at our disposal to watch. That's one of the things we could do. So we watched everything. So then as we went through the week, when we would go to dinner and lunch, we saw less and less of the teams that were there. They would start getting smaller and smaller. And the guys that were probably going to be in our that was vying for our spot, one day I said, Rowan, they're not here. Those coaches, they're not here. They're gone. So we're knew we were getting closer. We get to Friday and they say, okay, everybody, we're going to go to the suits at CBS and you're going to interview. So we interviewed with all the people from CBS. I don't know how many people were in that room, 30 people. And it was just all the executives. And so we auditioned then. We were the second team to interview for that. And then when we got back, they said, okay, Shane and Rowan, you're the first. You're going to medical. So we knew at that point that we were probably being considered pretty highly because we were the first to go to medical. So they drew our blood. They did all this. They did all this stuff. We had to go to psychological evaluation. So we went to this Dr. Z. We had to do a test, and it I was the last one in there trying to take this test. And so that's kind of how it came back. And then they said, okay, that's all we need. And they put us on a plane and they said, okay, we'll let you know if you've got the show in 3 weeks. Well, 3 weeks went by, 4 weeks went by. And I think it was almost 3 months. And then they called us a month before we went on the show and said, you're on the show. And the reason we were one of the originals that got cast, but the problem is that they didn't have enough teams that they had for the show, so they had to do a whole nother audition round. That's why it took so long. So that's kind of how it came about.
Oh, wow.
And then next thing we knew, we were on a plane, and you hand your phones and you don't talk or see anybody for 30 days. And the only time they would have somebody call our family is one person from The Amazing Race, not The Amazing Race, but the production office would call my sister, who would call Rowan's mom to let them know. They'd say, Shane and Rowan are okay, and they'd hang up. That's all they'd say. They'd say, hi, Amazing Race, Shane and Rowan are okay. They'd hang up. That's all they'd say to my sister.
Wow.
And that was it. So
wow.
It was a whirlwind, but that's how it came about. But again, if you want to do The Amazing Race, you want to do any of these shows, I would never do Survivor, because Survivor is 24/7. You have cameras on. You don't know what's going on. With The Amazing Race, you know you're going to have a break within 48 hours. Our first leg was 48 hours, and then we got to rest. We got to eat everything, and then our next rest was 36 hours. But after that 48 hours with the leg, you get out of you have exit interviews after you get off that leg, and you eat. And after all the interviews and everything, and you eat, you have to get back on the mat 12 hours later. Well, it's about 3 hours to get to eat. Then you do your interviews and everything. I think
it's a journey, isn't it, Shane?
Yeah, we had 4 hours of sleep on that leg. You don't get to rest that long. But that's why I would do The Amazing Race. It was great and fun and everything. But if you want to do it, I say send a tape in. They get about 10,000 tapes and submissions a season. So it's difficult, but we can do it. You can do it.
Well, that's crazy. And it's always interesting to hear, what it takes to get through the process. It's interesting to also hear what happens once you're on the show, and the fact that what you see is real. I've heard from folks on Survivor, and Rose, not so sure if it's real, but as far as Survivor,
it's television.
I hear you. It's television real. But and I didn't see your episodes, but I know you guys went down in the second round. What happened there?
Yeah,
we went down the second round. The first round, they did everything they could to get us to go down that round, and sort of much to their dismay, we ended up third, and their shock, I think. And then the second round, we did go down. And then, interestingly enough, as I said, it's television reality. When we did go off, Bertram, who's the creator, was like, we ran into him in an airport. He said, you're funny. We should have kept you longer. It's like, well, yeah, when the show was broadcast, it was interesting because we were on, as I said, the first 2 episodes. And then once we were cut as a team, their ratings dropped. We were told they dropped 10%, and they lost over 2 million viewers and never quite got them back. So we were a team favorite. But, when you sign the contract, it makes it very clear the producers have the right to do anything at any time to any team for any reason. It's TV. You'll see they're story writers, they're story editors, and they're writers and such. And it's like, well, why do you need a writer or a story editor on a reality program? Well, guess why?
Yeah, no, I get that. Again, when I was doing some homework, I saw your online profiles for The Amazing Race. And I'm going to test your memory, or maybe you'll still feel this way. But do you recall, starting with Rowan, one of the questions was, what famous person reminds you of yourself? And then what famous person reminds you of Shane?
Oh, well, me, I always hear either Lou Costello or Nathan Lane forever. And Shane, I always thought Stan Laurel is who Shane reminded me of. I don't know what I would have said then, but he always reminded me of a Stan Laurel.
You did.
We've always been like a Laurel and Hardy or an Abbott and Costello. I always say, yes, we're Laurel and Costello is who we are. And on The Amazing Race, that's all our friends. They were like, oh my God, it's like, Abbott and Costello going to safari.
Yeah, you did. And that's exactly what you said, except you added Eric Stone Street from Modern Family for yourself.
Yeah, I hear
and
that.
you added Don Knotts for Shane.
True. Yes. All right.
So Shane, same question for you. Do you recall what you said about what famous person reminds you of yourself, and what famous person or persons remind you of Rowan?
I think I said with Rowan, I said it was a cross between Nathan Lane and Lou Costello. I think. I don't know. I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, Rowan's got Nathan Lane for forever. I mean, so that's it.
For sure.
With me, I think a cross between Mark Hamill and Keith Carradine. There was a third person. I can't remember maybe John Cryer, maybe Phil.
Well,
Yep, that was it. John Cryer, exactly.
Oh my God, my memory.
It also asked. This is a good question because having been partners for so long, and this is true of any long-term relationship, you're going to have pet peeves, and then conversely, there are going to be things that you like about each other. So you were asked about pet peeves with respect to Amazing Race, but as of today, I'm going to ask each of you what your pet peeves would be about each other, and conversely, what are your favorite things about each other?
Go ahead, Shane. It'll take me a while to think.
Yeah. Pet peeves, probably just
we'll be here a while.
I think again, some of that, I've never known anybody go to the bathroom as much as Rowan. I think he's always, and that's just not to say anything. As far as that, what else? Pet peeves. Lot of belching, but that's just part.
And Dennis, that's because I go to the bathroom 2 or 3 times a day, and Shane goes 2 or 3 times a week. That's why he feels like I go to the bathroom a lot. Context, that's all.
Yeah.
And okay, what about your favorite things?
Favorite things, I would say Rowan's a very loyal person, very kind, sometimes overly kind to people. I think he just wants, I think, he loves animals. He loves some people. So yeah, I think he's a kind person. So.
And what about you, Ron? What would you say as far as peeves and favorite things with respect to Shane?
I don't pet peeves. I don't know that I have any set of pet peeves per se, other than he's usually right and I'm usually wrong. That can be annoying. His car, it's like, riding in your grandmother's car. The way he takes care of it, but it's his car, so fine. And then things that, he is saying loyal, he's more, he gets less emotionally involved than I do, as he was saying, it's, Shane will say, oh, people take advantage of you. It's like, well, no, I allow people to take advantage of me. Shane's much more astute in terms of, not letting that happen to him. And it does happen to me, and I just accept it as that was my choice that caused that. So he's definitely smarter than me in that sense, for sure.
I want to go in another direction here. When you guys were at our house, a few months ago, we had some great conversations. And one of the things, and I know Kim has shared this with me too, is your relationship with Gary Marshall and the business relationship, as well as, I guess, the personal relationship you had with Gary Marshall. And then I also want to talk about the relationship, Rowan, that you had with Katharine Hepburn. But beginning with Gary Marshall, what was that? What was that like, and what did that entail?
Well, that was really, both of those were really primarily mine. Shane, met Gary through me, and Kim, of course, met Gary through me through auditioning. I again have a history of working as an administrator, an executive in the American Theater. When we moved to Los Angeles, Shane and I decided I wasn't going to do any more of that kind of work. And what happened was, to make a long story short, the Geffen Playhouse, a very well-known playhouse out there, was having some difficulties, and the new team, which came in from Steppenwolf in Chicago, wonderful theater with a Tony Award-winning reputation, they came in to take over, and they needed help. They called me to come in and help as an advisor, which I reluctantly agreed to do. I said, you've got to hire theater, a go-go. So then I hired Shane. He came in with us as the package. In the course of doing that, I became involved with Noah Wiley and the Blank Theater Company, which was another theater company. I became as an actor, but all of a sudden they realized, oh, he's not just an actor. He's at the Geffen. He's a producer type. So one of the people who was involved in the Blank was on the softball team with Gary Marshall. And Gary Marshall at the time had a theater called the Falcon Theater in Toluca Lake in Burbank that would occasionally, once in a while, do productions. They were really kind of vanity productions. They would do maybe one every year, more like one every 2 years or so, whenever Gary felt like doing something. And so this person, literally, they were at a softball game, and they kept saying, Gary, you got to meet Rowan. You got to meet Rowan. So all of a sudden he calls me, hey, Rowan, it's Ron. Hi, Ron. How are you? He said, hold on, somebody wants to talk to you. And the next thing I know, hi, it's Gary Marshall. How are you? How's it going? Hey, I understand you run theaters. I have a theater. Maybe you'd like to come and run it, And so, that was one of those where I was like, well, I really don't want to run theater. I'm trying to, do more acting. He said, well, I hire actors. Maybe you heard. Might be good to meet me no matter what. Gary Marshall. So I went in and met with Gary and fell in love immediately. Gary was like my second father. We were very, very, very close. They even phoned me. I couldn't get to St. Joe's when he was passing away, but they phoned to let me know. And then once he did, they phoned ahead of time. And I'm still very close. I talked to Barbara, his wife, right before Christmas. And so when I was hired then and started to run the Falcon, now the Gary Marshall Theater, it's been renamed for Gary. I hired Shane to come in and to run the box office, which he'd done for me in New York and other places where I had worked. So Shane came in that way. And then Kim, we were doing a children's show, and Shane introduced me to Kim, and I was like, oh man, she'd be like perfect for this, And so she came in and auditioned, and Gary, she always thanks me. It's like, Gary cast you. I may have recommended you, but trust me, Gary didn't hire everybody I recommended. So it was Kim's talent and such. So that's how I got involved with Gary. And really that's how Shane got involved with Gary.
Sure. Well, you also told me the story about Katharine Hepburn, who, as I mentioned at the onset, I love Katharine Hepburn. And you told the story about when she was interviewed by Barbara Walters.
Yes. And
kind of the aftermath. And you have to tell that story, as you did to me, doing your impersonation of Katharine Hepburn.
It's and funny, it came up all over again, because when Barbara Walters passed away recently, that was part of the retrospect of her career, bane of her career from her point of view. During the course of an interview, Barbara Walters had been trying to get Kate for an interview for years, as many people had. She finally landed Kate, and in the course of the interview, and it's somewhat taken out of context, but she really did say to Kate, she said, Miss Hepburn, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And I was watching the program. I'm thinking, I know Kate well enough to know, well, you're an idiot, whatever. Kate said, well, I don't know. I never really gave it a thought. I mean, I suppose, an oak tree from the acorn doth the mighty oak grow. I never really gave it a thought, whatever. And so the next day I called the house. I used to spend a lot of time up in Fenwick. Kate lived in Turtle Bay at an apartment in New York, but she spent every summer and almost every weekend up at the family home, which was up in Fenwick in Connecticut, outside of Old Saybrook. So I called the house, and Dick, her brother, who's my dear, dear, dear friend, Dick answered the phone. Hepburn house. I said, hey, Dick, it's Rowan. How are you? And he's like, good. I said, I thought for sure you Hepburns were some kind of a nut tree, and he laughed. And I said, you know what I am? I'm a son of a birch. And Kate, I didn't know, but Kate had picked up on one of the other lines, and Kate was like, no, you're not. You're an ash.
I love that.
Yeah, they were the two of them, Kate and Dick, lived together. There's an interesting dynamic between the two of them. I always say that Kate was an imitation of who Dick was in real life. That's the Katharine Hepburn is a creation that Kate Hepburn came up with. And I think a lot of it was based on her brother, Dick. And they were both, Dick was one of my dearest, closest, best friends. and Kate became a good friend as well. But it was really Dick who was my friend, and Shane got to come up and meet Dick well, you met Dick numerous times, and he got to meet Kate once. So.
Yeah, that would be a thrill for me for sure. In hearkening back to what you had to say about Gary Marshall earlier, you mentioned Penny Marshall, his sister, and I'm sure most of the audience would recognize Penny Marshall from Laverne and Shirley and other things, of course. But you mentioned that she was involved in the Pottsville Maroons venture, and I want to talk a little bit about that. You already spoke a little bit about The Hex, which is one of the screenplays that you've written with your partner, and the Pottsville Maroons is the other one that we spent some time talking about, and I think that the audience would really be intrigued by that.
It's an amazing story. I mean, the two questions I ask people are, do you know what the smallest town is in America to ever win the NFL championship? And it's Pottsville, Pennsylvania. I also say to people, do you know the only team in the history of the NFL to ever win the championship and then have it taken away and forfeited? Same team, the 1925 Pottsville Maroons. It's considered the 100th anniversary, as you know, about a year or two ago of the NFL came around, and there were many retrospects, obviously, of the 100 years. And the History Channel called the 1925 Pottsville Maroons the greatest scandal in the 100-year history of the league. Sports Illustrated also highlighted it, and the guy, Tony Latone, who was literally a coal miner came out. There are all these college, big shots, on the team or whatever, and they still didn't quite have the plunger to get the ball over the line. In those days, they didn't pass so much. It was more like, organized wrestling. And they got this guy out of the coal mines who was well known for, having strong legs and a tough head. And Tony Latone is his name. Tony Latone went on to become, and this is Red Grange, the Galloping Ghost, considered the greatest football player of all time. This is the guy that Red Grange said, this is the greatest football player of all time, Tony Latone. He was fierce. There was no one like him. Red Grange faced the Pottsville Maroons twice in one game. In the first series, he was knocked out cold, got up, dusted himself off, went back in. Second series, he was knocked out cold again. He walked over to the sidelines and said, here's the $500 back. I'm not going to play against these guys. I won't live. And to this day,
Crazy.
as far as records go, the Tony Latone has more touchdowns and more yards gained than Red Grange. And in the first year of the Hall of Fame, 64, I believe it was, 63, 64, he was on the ballot along with Red Grange, but he never got in. And Tony Latone still isn't in there. And the Pottsville Maroons is the story of Tony Latone, this lost, forgotten, amazing football player who carried this small town team to the NFL championship. It ended up being forfeited because it was something the owner of the team did that was against league regulations. So the owner ended up costing them their championship. But unfortunately, what happened is in that the legacy of Tony Latone, this amazing, amazing man, who, by the way, this is a guy who his father passed out drunk and died on the street in Chicago when Tony was 11 years old. He lied and said he was 14 so he could go to work in the coal mines to support his mother and his 6 sisters. It's an unbelievable story. Hopefully, it will get to the screen. And it's also about the early days of the NFL, which many people, huge following, but many people don't know.
For sure.
The NFL was a joke. It was like, WWE wrestling or whatever. I mean, the college ball was that was the big game. But Tony Latone and the Pottsville Maroons, having beaten the Notre Dame, the Four Horsemen, and the Seven Mules, considered the greatest football team at that time of all time, the Pottsville Maroons beat them by a field goal. And many sports historians consider that and Red Grange joining the NFL to be the two events that lifted the National Football League over collegiate football and started it to become the amazing, amazing multi-billion-dollar industry it is today. That was Tony Latone who carried the NFL on their back. And unfortunately, the NFL turned their back on Tony Latone. All right, we're hoping our movie will be able to fix that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great story that needs to be told. And I mean, you've already told it, but it needs to be seen and known by everybody out there, which leads to another question. You talked a bit about the Hex, now the Pottsville Maroons. I know that both of those scripts have won awards. They're being well received. And maybe Shane, you can chime in as far as this goes, because you went through the financing woes that come with trying to produce a film. What is involved in getting a script greenlighted and getting the financing? What do you have to do in order for us to see that, and see the Hex and see the Pottsville Maroons at some point on the big screen?
Well, I think it comes down to getting, financing, of course, is your biggest thing. Money is king as far as that goes. And then again, it's one of those situations where if me and Rowan wanted to raise the money, or Rowan wanted to raise, he could do it and produce it. But Rowan really doesn't want to produce it. And he wants to stay on as a producer, but doesn't really want to be the line producer of a show. But if you can find a group of people to get together and get it that way, that's how you get something independently. Now, a studio is a whole different thing, and Rowan can touch a little bit on that, because he's come very close to that as opposed to that. But as far as something like Beauty Queen Butcher, which is the minuscule budget that it had, that was just a matter, no matter what you do, you're busting your ass trying to make all the pieces fit together, whether it's $30,000 or it's $5 million. It's you go through the same struggles in that sense, because it's like that. And it's interesting, once you start to raise money, you start to talk to people, it seems like it starts to snowball a little bit, like anything, like, people attach and the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because, I don't know, the energy you're putting out or whatever. But as I said with Beauty Queen Butcher, we just went from step to step. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We wrote a script. Okay, now what do we do with that? Well, I guess we better try to raise money. Okay, how do we do that? Well, we talk to people. So we talk to everybody and anybody. And some people say yes. Some people say no. Some people say, let me think about it. You never hear from them. Some people think about it and call you a month later, say, oh yeah, I'd like to get involved. It might not be as much as what you wanted, but it was, you'd take anything. And then you have, an investor that puts up a huge amount, which is like, okay, now we have this money. Now we got to, this is our money. We got to create this partnership. Now we got to, cast. Now I got to think about, okay, production schedule. Now I got to do this, that, everything. I mean, if you try to think about it all, it's so overwhelming. And I was fortunate enough to go through the process with Jill, where we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and we did it step by step, and it didn't feel as overwhelming, because, we got it done. And, you can say whatever you want about Beauty Queen Butcher. There's people that love it or hate it. I'm not offended if you hate it. I'm not offended. It's just what it is. It is what it is. Did we do things right? Yes. Did we do things wrong? Yes. Could we done things better? Yes. It's just one of those things, but you live and learn. I mean, the situation was with Beauty Queen Butcher, when we edited it, we were in an editing studio that you had to edit. You had to do an edit. And once you were done with that edit, you could move forward. You couldn't go back to the beginning and change it. You had to do it all as you went. That's why it's a 2-hour film. People say, my God, that film is so long. There's people that love it because you set it up, the characters. But if we could have changed it, we would have, but we couldn't at the time, because if we were happy with that scene, we could move on. So that's kind of how it goes. But as far as my little project like that, it was big at the time, and it was hard to raise, $35,000, but we did it and we got it done. But it's all the same. But Rowan could talk about the studio versus the independent a little bit as far as.
Well, the interesting thing with Beauty Queen Butcher, I was going to say, is it's the genre. I mean, that's why Pottsville Maroons is certainly my passion project. But that you're talking about a $25-30 million movie, as opposed to the Hex, which is $3 to $5 million. And horror, this movie of Shane's, it sat there forever, and all of a sudden it took off, because horror, it's the hot genre right now. The Hex is interesting in terms of, I learned, I was very fortunate. I worked for Gary Marshall for 5 years, running his theater and producing for him. And then I worked with Penny Marshall for 10 years. So I always say, I learned the show from Penny and the business from Gary. And Gary's whole thing is, don't waste your time working. The way you get to make movies is you make movies that make money. That's how you get to make movies. Forget the critics. If you make money, they don't care what the critic says. Gary was very good at that. Pretty Woman was not liked at all by the critics when it came out. Now they all love it, in retrospect. Many of his films, same thing. But Gary's basically, what he taught me was, who's your audience? Is there enough of them to merit the amount of money that you're looking to raise, so your investors or the studio has a good chance of getting their money back? Because if they do, they're going to want to make more movies with you. So that's why we came up with the Hex. It's $3 to $5 million, which is doable. One of the things that's interesting with the Hex is, I also learned from Gary, an underserved market is teenage girls. They all go for teenage boys, but teenage girls go to the movies just as much, and it's an underserved market. So the lead in ours is a teenage girl. In addition to which, right now, one of the big things that's happening in society, which was a thing too, is you want to tap into the zeitgeist, as he'd say. Teenage girls are having a real struggle right now because of TikTok and Instagram. And in fact, there was a congressional hearing not long ago about their self-image and what the internet and some of these platforms is having a negative impact on them. And this whole film, in an underhanded, not in an overt way, but in a very clear way, the message of the film is, your life is defined by the choices you make. And it has very strong religious context to it because of the Amish. I mean, the boy that she falls in love with is an Amish boy. He's on what's called Rumspringa, where he's deciding, does he want to stay in the Amish community or leave? And it's his spiritual struggle that kind of mirrors the struggle she's going through. And so it's the kind of horror suspense film. It has almost like a Titanic Romeo and Juliet kind of ending, which again, I think is really powerful. But what's interesting is when it comes to the business end of stuff, it's the kind of film that not only will it play hard, not only will it play the teens and tweens female audience, but it's also the kind of film that could be marketed and play in the Christian film market. The Christian film market is huge. It's completely separate from Hollywood in some respects, although Hollywood is buying into it more and more and more. Columbia Pictures and Sony especially, Lionsgate, but Universal now is also doing some deals. But there's a whole other circuit that's just Christian films. This movie would actually be able to play in both of those markets. So it's one of those where I think it has a really good, strong commercial potential to it. I learned from Gary, he'd always say, it's show business, it's not show art, and keep in mind the business is twice as big as the show, but the show always comes first. There it is. That's the entire entertainment industry in a nutshell, from one of the geniuses of the business that I was lucky to work with for those years.
I love that. And by the way, I really hope that they both get made, the Hex and the Pottsville Maroons. And I also hope that our audience does check out Beauty Queen Butcher, because seriously, I love it. And I can see why it's gaining so much momentum as kind of a cult classic. And I could see that continuing. It is just one of those movies that, like I said, I have personal reasons to love it, including, one of the actresses in it. But I just think it's a lot of fun. So I want everybody to check that out.
And Dennis, if I can hop in 1 second, I'm going to plug, because this also just happened this last month. After, what is it? How many years? 10 years? However long it was. Oh, longer than that. The rights for Johnny Got His Gun, which we filmed with Ben McKenzie, finally came back to us. And that's now available on Tubi for free. You can watch it, or you can. It's on Apple Plus. You can rent it, or you can download it and have it forever. Ben McKenzie got really excellent reviews. It's very different. It's a one-person movie, 79 minutes, based on a well-known book by Dalton Trumbo. But Ben McKenzie's performance is astounding. It was because of that movie that he ended up getting Southland, which was on NBC, and then went over to, I think it was TNT, and that led him to Gotham, and it really helped build his career. It's the first starring role Ben ever had in a movie. He's the only person in the movie. It's a film stage play, but it's shot as a movie, not as a stage play. And it's also available, and hopefully people will, go on to Tubi and watch it, or download it, better yet. At Apple or Prime. It's a bunch of platforms as well. But that just happened as well this last month. So, and that'll go too.
And I saw that, and I do intend to watch it myself. So I'll definitely be doing that in the near future.
Away. He's amazing.
And I know, I'm monopolizing you guys' time, and I don't want to do that. But I do. We've got the Oscars coming up. We have to talk a little bit about that since we're talking about movies. Personally, I did not care for the change in the format from the limited nominees of, I think it's went from 5 to 10 now.
Yes.
But it is what it is. So I've seen all but 2 of the nominated movies. I have my pick, but I'm interested in what you guys think, what you think should win from what you've seen. What do you think will win for Best Picture?
Wow, that's it's weird because there's so many things come into play. But the Banshee and Inisherin with Colin Farrell, he was incredible. I mean, just performance wise, he was incredible. I don't know if the movie will win for overall, but I think he has a really, really good shot. The film Everywhere, Everyone at Once. What is that? Everything
everywhere all at once. Yeah,
it was interesting, wild. It had some interesting, great performances, but just wow, it was interesting. It's going to be interesting because there's stuff all over the place. It's like
really
apples and oranges trying to compare to a certain degree, especially this year.
Mm-hmm.
Ro, what do you think? I can't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to answer your original question, I think probably Everything Everywhere All at Once is probably the lead to win. And I think it's a shame that, and this is what the Oscars, in my opinion, keep doing wrong. Yes, they expanded it, and all of a sudden, you have a film like Top Gun in there. They keep picking these esoteric movies that win that audiences don't see. And then when they do see them, they go, oh, I didn't really like that. And I think it's hurting the industry. So, I think they ought to pick Top Gun. There's a great, terrific, fun, popcorn, great movie. That's the kind. Again, now I come from the Gary Marshall school of commercial. You want to make movies?
Mm-hmm.
You make movies that make money, So that's, that's, I used to always say when I went in theater, one of my famous expressions is, people would say art, and I'd say, who is this art, and why doesn't he get his own theater? It's not show art, it's show business, so those would be my ideas and opinion on the Oscars this year.
Yeah, I have to agree. I like I said, I've seen all but 2. The only 2 I haven't seen are Women Talking and All Quiet on the Western Front. Yeah. And of course, I've seen All Quiet on the Western, the original. But I thought Everything
movie. Everywhere. It's in German.
I
know. In the category. I'm sorry.
I know. There's a separate category for that, right?
Yes. Yes.
But I did love Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I agree. I think that's probably the front runner. I loved Banshees was so bizarre. It frustrated me, but I loved it. It was so good. Triangle of Sadness was bizarre, but I loved it. I liked The Fabelmans. Elvis I thought was terrific. Yeah. I was very surprised that Baz Luhrmann didn't get a nod for Best Director. Yeah. I guess speaking of, do you think there were any notable snubs? I mean, I think that was a bit of a snub. Any other snubs?
So unusual. It's very unusual for a movie to get. Ironically, Penny Marshall was in the same category. And of course, a female director, one of the great female directors. Awakenings nominated for Best Picture, but she was never nominated for Best Director. And it's absurd because the movie doesn't happen without the director. Getting it to the screen is the producer. What's on the screen is the director. And it's simply what is on that screen is 100% the director. It would almost be like, well, the person who sold Leonardo da Vinci deserves to get an Oscar for the paint, but Leonardo doesn't really deserve an Oscar for painting the Mona Lisa.
Right.
No sense.
No, I agree. I thought, frankly, Tom Hanks should have got a nod for Best Supporting Actor. I thought he was great in Elvis too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, but I don't know. Kim and I have these discussions a lot, which I love. I'm a huge film fan, so it's always fun to talk. And I know, like I said, I could talk to you guys forever, but I don't want to take too much more time. But there is one question I have to ask, and that is what your favorite movies of all time would be. Because Shane, I would include among mine The Green Book.
Oh,
so I was wondering if that would be in your list, or or what would be in your list?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say that would be just because I was a part of it, and it did so well and it caught lightning
Yeah,
in a
well,
bottle. And, we had, I just remember with that film, when I filmed, it was like the first week of filming, and I thought they'd been filming for 3 months, but we had just started, and they were all worried about the snow scene because it was all filmed in Louisiana. So they had a snow scene coming up that next week, and they're like, how are we going to do this? Whatever. Well, that next week when they filmed all that snow scenery, it actually snowed, and it hadn't snowed in Louisiana in 20 years. So you're just like, okay, wow, what's this? And then you have one of the writers, one of the 3 writers, he was supposed to board the plane that crashed into the World Trade Center, but he got stuck in traffic and he didn't get on that flight. So it was just like all these things that came together. Crazy. And that's really what a film is to a certain degree, everything just coming together and all these things being in place. And that caught lightning in a bottle. I think one of my favorite movies, and I really, it's got to be, I love Chicago. The musical Chicago was a brilliant movie. I think from top to bottom, I think it is wonderful. I think Sound of Music is a perfect movie from beginning to end. And then just one of my favorite movies is Hairspray, the original by John Waters, not the musical, but the original Hairspray with Ricky Lake.
Oh, I was going to say,
fine. Brilliant. Just the editing.
I was going to say, it sounded like you were going. Oh, I'm sorry. It sounded like you were going all musicals, but you prefer the non-musical version of Hairspray.
Yes, because and the thing is that not only was it a great script and a great movie and great morals and all that, but the editing, when it would go from black and white to color, I mean that's so visually appealing, and just that they did it again. It was a very low budget movie, but come on, Divine and Ricky Lake and Sonny Bono and Deborah Harry, all those. What a brilliant movie. I loved it. And John Waters, he's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Rowan? What are your favorites?
I mean, have to have a whole other podcast. There's so many because there's so many different types. I mean, everything from The Fourth Man, which is a Paul Verhoeven movie that was just the most shocking ending I think I've ever seen in a movie, to I think my favorite musical is actually Funny Girl. I mean, I love Sound of Music. I love Oklahoma. I love Music Man. There are a lot of great ones. Chicago's terrific, but Funny Girl is just, Streisand just picks up that movie, and it's a terrific movie. Supporting cast also great. The Stuntman, Peter O'Toole movie about making movies is one of, if not my favorite movie about making movies, certainly one of them. Just wonderful. There's so many. Obviously, I have a preference for Kate's movies. Lion in Winter is probably my favorite. Oh. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner also, which was really, it was Spencer's last movie that he did. He was dying. He died 3 weeks after they completed it. Catherine Houghton, who's Kate's niece in real life. Catherine plays the love interest, Sidney Poitier's fiance, and Catherine is still a very dear friend of mine. So that movie also, just so many different. And then Star Wars. I mean, the original Star Wars. The original E.T., Jaws. Steven Spielberg. I mean, there's just so many. So many. Clockwork Orange. I mean, I could go on for days and days and days. I mean, there are just so many that I feel. I don't think I could ever pick one.
I think you're right. I think we
or something.
Yeah, we definitely could do an entire podcast on the movies, and we'll have to do that sometime in the future. But I do appreciate you guys being here, and I do want to be mindful of your time. So I want to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you being here. I can't wait to see you guys again in person and have some more conversations. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody else for joining us today and remind you again, be sure to subscribe to, rate, and review Uncommon Convos on your favorite podcast platform, and visit uncommonconvos.com to watch the video version of this and every episode. Also, be sure to check out our other podcast, Legal Squeaks, to get the latest information on legal and consumer news that might impact your life. Thanks again to our sponsor, Vandergast Law. If you need help with an injury claim anywhere in the country, reach out at vlaw.com. Check us out again for another Uncommon Convo next time. And in the meantime, have a great day, stay safe, and I love you all.